So how new is this? How old is this piece?
It's more than
Well, I mean, how new is it to you? When did you first learn this?
2 months.
So it's brand new. How long does it normally take you to get to a point where you're absolutely comfortable with notes and memory?
9 months.
Yeah, so this is really quite new, isn't it? And it's incredibly dense, isn't it? It's a lot that goes on here. When you practice for memorization, how do you practice?
I take 1 line maybe at a time.
One line at a time, and what do you do?
Just practice over and over.
So you just go over it and over and over it. Do you think about the harmonic progression?
No.
Okay. Do you think about the structure of the phrase?
Sometimes.
Do you think about it in terms of what it feels like in your hand?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you use any kind of practice tools?
Not particularly.
Yeah. Okay, so these are all things like for myself, and by the way, how many times do you think you do it in a row before you feel like, okay, I feel like I've got it, it's comfortable? How many times?
A lot of times.
Well, that's a pretty vague number. What is a lot to you?
10.
10 is a lot? And of those 10 times, how many are perfect and how many are imperfect?
Half of them. Yeah.
Okay, so really you've done it 5 times. And 5 times that don't really count, right? So those two sort of cancel each other out, which means 0 times, okay? So what I would think about in terms of repetition, especially with respect to memory, is to make a plan, first of all. What's the plan? And you can think about your plan in terms of harmony or in terms of melody, in terms of the structure, in terms of I need to get to this particular place, you know, in terms of the shape of the keyboard, the shape of the phrase. But as many times as it takes you to get one that is perfect, those don't count. So it's the one that's perfect that we have to repeat. And I would suggest to everybody, I mean, I always ask my students this question, how many is a lot? You know, how many is enough? Well, enough is never, you never can do it enough times. That's the first thing. But we can at least say that there's a number that we can strive for. And for me, that number is 20. If I can repeat something 20 times in a row without any errors, then the likelihood is number 21 will also be without errors. You know? And that doesn't mean in one day I'm done. That means the next day I do it 20 times again. You know? That we need to do things so many times that we have an innate knowledge and an understanding that's sort of beyond our mind or even our fingers, but something that combines both of those things, right? So that when we're confronted with a room full of people and we have to start this challenging etude, we are there. We can absolutely do it 100% of the time, okay? What key is this in?
C minor.
C minor would have 3 flats. This has how many sharps?
6.
6 sharps. So, do you know there are tricks that you can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
D sharp.
There we go. D sharp minor, exactly. So it's not an easy key to think about to begin with, right? But do you know your chords and your harmonies and things like that? Like, can you play a D sharp minor triad? Okay, so as you go through, you don't have to know your harmony completely. You don't have to be an expert in theory. But if you can identify a D sharp minor triad, then you can look through and find your D sharp minor triad so that in the course of a phrase you can say, I need to get to that D sharp minor triad. And if you can expand that so that you have a basic understanding of your 3 primary chords, like 1, 4, and 5, D sharp minor, G sharp minor, and A sharp minor, then you can look through and say, okay, now I can recognize a little bit more, I have a little bit more knowledge about where I'm going, rather than looking at a page and thinking, I just have to do this so many times that my fingers remember where to go. I said earlier, I think I said earlier, if I didn't, I meant to, you should have a plan. Always have a plan. This is what's happening in the music. This is what I want to do with that. Okay? So that you're constantly, when you're practicing 2 things. You're practicing the fingers, but you're practicing a thought. And it's those 2 things which work together that give us success. Okay? one or the other won't work. I can think I know, but if my fingers don't know, I can't play it. My fingers can play it, but I have no idea what they're playing. It's not going to work. Okay? So we have to integrate these two things. We have to think all the time, what's my plan? And my fingers have to do it a million times. All right? Now, what do you know about Scriabin?
He's Russian.
Good. Anything else?
He has long fingers.
He might. I haven't ever met him.
He has reaches.
Are you sure it's not Rachmaninoff you're thinking about?
No, I know he has really long.
Scriabin had a big reach.
Yeah, well.
I didn't know that, actually. That's news to me. What else do you know about Scriabin?
That's it.
Scriabin is one of my favorite composers. I think he's one of the most interesting composers we have. When did he live?
In the 20th century. Oh, in 1900s.
Yes, early 1900s. He died in 1915. He was born in either 75 or 65. I always get them backwards. So really, in a way, most of his life was certainly in the 19th century. He was very young when he died, but he's also quite a famous pianist. He was a very famous pianist and traveled quite a lot as a performing pianist. What do you know about his music besides this piece? What do you know about his style?
Dramatic, I guess.
Dramatic is a good word, yes. There's another word I would use, colorful. His music is really full of beautiful colors. Do you know what a synesthete is? This is a really interesting thing. Does anyone know what a synesthete is? What's a synesthete?
Isn't it someone who experiences a connection of the senses, such as when they taste something, they might hear something?
Exactly, or they hear music in color, right? And Scriabin was someone who heard sound in color. And if you look online, you'll find this pretty easily. Look up a Scriabin color wheel. And so what he did was he mapped out for himself the specific colors that correspond with keys, with tonal centers. So he hears in color, right? And it's interesting, E flat, which is the enharmonic equivalent of D sharp, E flat is sort of purple or blue. Okay? I don't remember what color D sharp is. But those two, even though they're basically the same pitch, don't necessarily have the same color. Okay? So that's something to think about as you play. This piece is quite dramatic, it's quite strong, but it's also incredibly colorful. Have you listened to recordings?
Yes.
Who did you listen to?
Pauley.
Thank you. I think the best performance. Absolutely the best. And one of the things to notice about that is that not only does he play quite fortissimo, he plays quite pianissimo. But no matter what, he plays with a tremendous amount of color in his sound and lyricism. Okay? So this piece needs a lot more lyricism. Do you know what I mean by that word? It needs to be singing. It's almost a song, right? It's not a song I'd want to sing with my voice, but it's a very lyrical piece, great melody. Now, I do want to start again, and I want you to think about a couple of things. First of all, the left hand, while interesting, is not the main show. It's really about the melody, right? So I want you to think about hearing the melody more than the left hand. Now, also notice, these are triplets and these are not, right? These are 16ths. So what he's doing a lot of the time is making it so that the hands do not come together, right? So we want to feel this incredible freedom and independence between the hands. All right? Left hand should be very steady. Let's go again from the start. Now, there's no dynamic marking at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you think it starts piano, forte, mezzo piano?
In the middle.
I would say in the middle, but up. Okay? I think that he marks this patetico, right? What does he mean by patetico?
Like sudden.
Actually, what does that word mean? What does it refer to?
Patient.
Pathos. It's like there's this feeling, deep feeling. You know, like the Beethoven sonata, the Pathetique sonata, right? So it should be passionate, it should be intense, it should be deeply felt. Really intense beginning, not fortissimo, but intense. Go ahead. Good. And can you make this even sharper? No. So throughout the piece, I know it's very complex. I know there's a lot to do. There's a lot for the pianist to do. It's not an easy piece, but we have to be on time. Otherwise, what happens ultimately is our audience has no idea what's going on. Okay? Once more, sharp, clear rhythm. There's something about this thing. I want to hear that as a down. Down. So that we feel clearly this is a 1, 2. Okay, so that we feel squarely where the beat is. Okay, once more. Feel like you're singing that. Are you taking that with the right hand?
Yeah.
Okay, so part of the problem is that we lose track here because of that. All right? I don't have a problem if you take it with the right. I would prefer you took it with the left, but it's fine. The point is this has to still feel like triplet, triplet, triplet. Those have to all be equal all the time. One more time. I'm going to complain about that some. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Play the right hand alone. Right hand alone. Now, notice here he says da 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 ta 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 ta. So we want to really hear the clarity of that rest in there. Dee da da ta 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 ta. One more time, just the right hand. Even sharper. There you go. Whoa, but that was late now. Once more. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 4. Now each time he does that, it should gain momentum and really rush to the top. Yabba-bum, ba-bum, bum, and land up there. Okay? And notice that this one is higher, right? It's higher than that by a step. Oh, and higher again. So what is he doing? He's going up, 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 right? So yes, we want to be strong, we want to be powerful, but this has to be more, and this has to be more still. Do this again with just the right hand. 2, polite. 1, 2, 3, most. Okay, so that squareness that you're better able to do now, we have to do with both hands. Okay? Do you want to try it a little slower?
Sure.
By the way, how is your 4 against 3?
Okay.
This piece is filled with 4 against 3.
Yeah.
Do you practice 4 against 3? I would practice doing scales in 4 against 3. Do you ever do 3 against 2? I would practice doing just simple scales. 4 in one hand, 3 in the other. 2 in one hand, 3 in the other. So that you get really used to this rhythm, because ultimately it would be great to hear that this is 4 against 3. Once more from the beginning. then, it was hard to concentrate on the important things. But when you approach this piece, you have to think to yourself, here's my list of priorities, okay? Now, there are a million notes, it's loud a lot of the time, and we use a lot of pedal. So what does that give us? A mess, right? So it's our job to hack away at this and figure out what is my priority. I need to have clarity so I can understand my phrasing, so I can understand the colors, okay? So the first thing to do is be sensitive with your foot